Welcome to Leadership, the Secret Sauce, the podcast where we talk to extraordinary coaches and leaders to dive into the realms of leadership and coaching. We're your hosts, Dave Lipsky and Matt Dodson. So let's jump in with another guest and find out their answer to the question, what is your secret sauce? Well, welcome back. Before we begin, a quick shout out to our sponsor, Character Matters Coaching and Consulting, where they believe that your character is the compass guiding you through life's journey. Whether you're facing personal or professional challenges, they are dedicated to helping you discover and strengthen the core values that define who you are. Dave, who do we have on the podcast today?
I'd like to welcome Jennifer. And Jennifer, Matt and I started this podcast because we like to hang out with coaches and learn more about their secret sauce. We like to start off with just a quick energy check-in on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being low, 10 being high. Where's your energy level at the present moment?
Well, I have to keep it simple. I would say it's more about a 12 to 15, Ooh. But I'll keep it 8 or a 10 so we can...
I don't think anybody's ever said 12 to 15.
Really?
Yeah.
That is awesome. Yeah, no, we've never had a 12 or 15. You're exceeding the academic scale. It's which is awesome. Matt, where I don't know. It sets the bar high for you, Matt. Where are you?
Yeah, no, I'm probably just going to say I'm a 9. I mean, if you're going to anchor on a 10 to 15, then I'll be just under.
All right. So I'm coming in at a 10 today because I am visiting my 89-year-old mom in my childhood bedroom, going to a graduation ceremony later today. So I'm like excited, and I'm excited to talk to Jennifer. So I'm looking forward to our discussion for this podcast. So Jennifer, just to start out, like when you are traveling around and somebody turns to you and says, "So Jennifer, what do you do?" How do you answer that?
Oh, that's such a good question because we could say our titles and the places we work, but I tend to start with, well, I help people figure out what's going on behind all the stuff in their head and help them clear that out. And I would say that that's the closest thing to my secret sauce, but we'll talk about that soon. And then, of course, they'll ask, how do you do that? And then I can talk about it more.
I'm looking forward to learning more about that. I wanted to ask one question before we kick into those questions. When you win an award for something and they call you up to stage, what's the song you want playing, and why do you want it playing?
That's a great question. It varies day by day based on our energy, as it should. But today I'm feeling Daft Punk Around the World. That feels like the perfect cadence. Not too fast, not too slow. Nice blend of fun. And I've loved it since I was a student at Virginia Tech.
Go Hokies.
Right.
All right. So Jennifer, looks like you're calling from an academic office. And what is your secret sauce if you had to describe it? What makes you you?
So I think that what I've been told by people that I coach is that, one, I do help them clear out the things that are going on in that front part of their brain that are holding them back. And I've never worked with a leader who didn't know their best right answer. It's just clouded and covered by all these things like limiting beliefs or perceptions and other people's points of view, and they need help just clearing that out. And it helps build confidence. It helps them feel seen, feel heard, feel like the executive leader that they are, and be able to walk into a room and say what they need to say with both humility and care and love and leadership.
Can I ask you just, for some of our listeners, you've had a lot of experience as being an internal coach. Is it different that like coaching internally versus externally around clearing out that sort of where they're at?
100%. And I've seen it twofold. Oftentimes as an internal coach, there's a layer of or a consciousness of psychological safety because our job is working for that company. And oftentimes a coach internally is coaching people who are above them on the org chart. They're coaching senior leaders, executives, VPs, SVPs. And so, from a coaching perspective, you've got to be able to let go of your own ego and your own perspectives in order to be able to ask the bold questions, share the bold observations, and feel comfortable in that space as a coach. And so I encourage, and I also did this myself as an internal coach, having some time before each session to let go of all of those and set them aside. We don't ignore them. I don't think that's healthy, but I think setting those aside. Now, as far as the leader goes, there's also psychological safety concerns for them as well, because they also know that they are running a function or running the organization in which you are an employee as an internal coach. So giving them the space to be who they are and not going for the bold question in the same way I think I do as an external coach is really important. So pacing with them and being really conscious of their pace
Yeah.
is important.
Yeah. That's you know what? I think that's um there is a like a I don't know whether it's 15 minutes. Kind of there's a routine. You
Yeah.
can't just bounce from session to session. You really have to. I think it's really conscious and like okay, rather because it can be very friendly because
Mhm.
you know them and they work for company X just like you work for company X, and so I mean, what is the difference um, in that situation where you're really having to ask good, hard questions that nobody else in the company is asking because they're worried about their next role. Yeah.
I think that's the clarity in the contract, the agreement with the client, whether it's an internal client or an external client. We give each other permission to say bold things, to ask bold questions, to go places that are meaningful and matter. I've been trained by some of the best coaches out there and worked with them. And DJ Mish and Marsha Reynolds through Pyramid Resource Group, I got my PCC through them in the Healthcare Coaching Institute. And one of them, I believe it was Marsha, it might have been DJ, but had said, if you're bored in your coaching, you're doing it wrong. And for
Mm.
me, it's a really powerful thing. Now, the other caveat is that we all know that it's not about us as a coach, it's about the client. But if we can recognize these things in ourselves, it helps us to recognize them in our client as well. And so I think whether an internal coach or an external coach, when we're setting up that engagement, it's having that conversation of we're doing this in the space of care and love and progress or goal achievement, whatever language resonates with them.
Mm.
And we
I,
care.
I love I love the use the word love because I think that's
Yeah.
I think Anderson and Adams from the Leadership Circle profile talk about that leadership is really about love, and I think coaching is about love. I care enough about you to ask hard questions
Oh
and
yeah.
not just have a great conversation. I mean, I think that happened. Anyway, okay,
Mm-hmm.
so tell us when did you know that was your secret sauce?
Hmm. I think when I first started coaching, and this has been 10, 15 years ago, when I first started coaching, that's what I was noticing is that they don't want or need my answer. That's not coaching. That's consulting, which I do that as well. But I think, hmm, I'll tell you when I hadn't thought about exactly when, but there was a physician leader I was working with many years ago, and we're a whole person. We have personal life challenges, we have professional life challenges, and this individual was going through both. And when she had her aha moment of sorts of I can do this. And it's not that I can't, it's that there's all these perspectives and limiting beliefs coming into play. And she had named it for me, of you're bringing this forward for me and you're helping me clear this stuff out. So I really should, I'm not going to say who it is, but I should have credit her for helping me to kind of figure that out, that that's what we were doing in our interaction is she was, it's almost like we use an analogy because coaches love analogies, right? Um, Landscaping. If you've ever cleared land, and you've got weed eaters and you've got machetes and all kinds of things to clear out this old brush. sometimes there's really thick pieces with thorns that take some time to get out, or trees to cut down, and that takes time. So when we're working with a client, or whenever I'm working with a client, I'm thinking of it like that. It might not be just blowing leaves. It's more like clearing brush, and it requires some heavy equipment and some time, and we can't do it all in one day.
Hmm. Wow.
I'm trying to think of. I'm sorry, Matt. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Dave. I think that there's probably another analogy there. I think that because I think, well, when I think about that analogy, if it's not that time, sometimes those issues come up later on. After that leader has said, "Hey, look, didn't I really address this already?" And you're like, "Yeah, I realized that we're like session 10, but here it is again, just in case."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because, well, and do you all notice the coaching between the coaching? So when you're working with a client, you have there are things that they'll talk about, or they'll have their own mic drop moment mid session, later in the session, and then maybe they leave the session uncomfortable, and that's okay. It's not because we're leaving them in a bad place. They're where they need to be to sit with and to process. And then they come back, and there's all these things like, well, since we last talked, all this came up for me, and it's the coaching between the coaching that I think to be really magical in the process.
Mm.
I
And for,
like that, and I actually, as you were saying, clearing a field. As I come and visit my mom in my childhood bedroom, the field is very cluttered, right? And I'm thinking, all right, if I'm on the other side of being coached by Jennifer, how would I experience the clearing the field and focusing on what it's time for now?
how would you experience it? I think coaching is a dance, right? There's a dance to it, and it's hard to explain how it happens other than at least for my coaching style. I listen for the questions that you would want to be asked, and I find those in between the sentences. That sounds very tactical, but it's more of an intuitive process, and it's hard to explain. Yeah, yeah. So how you would experience it, I think you would tell me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you? I like that. And what is it like? What is it that you're reading? Like, what's the radar? I always think radar and regulation. Like, what are you reading in your client that tells you?
That's a really good question. I think it's the what they're not saying more so than what they are saying. It's the words that feel left off, the hesitation, the body language. And we've all done virtual coaching. In person is the best in my opinion, because I can pick up on some of those subtleties in behavior. It's the glances, it's the maybe, yeah, it's the hesitations, or the shoulders don't move like that when they're talking about one thing, but then they start squirming in their seat in another conversation, and right, the dancing around that we notice. Or the feet tell many stories, what we do with our feet and our legs.
I love that. That is something you can't see really on like a virtual session. You can't see their feet.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I worked
Yeah.
with an
That's,
individual. This is kind of interesting. I worked with an individual that I think she was tapping, and that's an energy release methodology. I don't know a whole lot about it. I just know basically what it is. And when we were in person meetings, I would see her, and you can kind of see my arm on the screen, but I would see her in person meetings tapping, and it was a self soothing mechanism. So
mm,
I could recognize when the meeting was going in a different path. Now this is in a leadership role, uh, but on Zoom or other online platforms, we don't catch some of those subtleties, which I think we can, uh, to a degree, catch them, but not quite the same. It almost becomes a question.
yeah. I think we miss some of the um, sights, sounds, and smells. I think that I know that people makes people feel uncomfortable, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
also like, hey, look, it's everything. And we catch a vibe in the room
Mm-hmm.
when we walk in, and I just know, like, maybe even greeting, the executive admin about how's everything going, and I get a feel or a vibe. What can I say?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
anyway,
it's good.
They do. That's one of the most important people I think in the company is the executive admin because they know they know more than most about
yeah,
that you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah.
Sorry, David, go
Go
ahead.
ahead, Dave. I feel like I want to drop another quote from Anderson and Adams here that they have in their book. I think it's a leadership, uh, but they talk about quoting this guy, Eric Geiger, where he says, "Leaders bring the weather," and it's something that's unspoken, but
Mm-hmm.
we know whether we can take a risk, whether we can say something, and it translates beyond language. It is like a sense that people in the room get, and I think coaches, I think we're asked to be more sensitive to that. Um, those unspoken shifts inside the room.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, that's such a powerful metaphor too. I'm a dual citizen of sorts, so I'm both a leader and a coach, and that's that duality. And it's fascinating when we play those different roles in our lives because we all do in some way, shape, or form. And being able to move with the weather, but also be conscious of how we set the weather in
Mm,
the room, in the team, in the family, even, and all of these pieces.
mm, yeah.
Yeah, this very.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, say that again, Jennifer. There's a slight delay on my end. I apologize.
Oh, that's okay. Uh, it's almost as if we have to be both the uh, the umbrella as a think of analogies, the umbrella as well as the cloud,
Mm,
lack thereof, and how we manage ourselves in that duality. I'm sure that many coaches experience that, and you all both have experienced it as well in your careers.
I,
yeah.
yeah, please, I continue with the umbrella and cloud because I love that analogy.
Yeah, that's really good. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jennifer, if you were just say you're the leader, what would you want from a coach?
And I have an amazing coach. She's been with me for, oh gosh, a very long time, 15 years. And what I value so much in how she works with me is both being firm and direct with me and saying things that could potentially hurt my feelings. I don't get mad very easily, so those kind of things, but she does it in a way that's so full of love and care and compassion while still also being very direct. Have you all ever read that book, Servant Leadership? I can't recall the author,
By
but
Robert Greenleaf?
yeah, I think it is. Yeah, I'm looking over
Hmm.
at my bookshelf to see. Um, but there's a chapter called on hugging and spanking, and it's a silly phrasing. But I think when I think about my coach, and her name's Janet, when I think about Janet, that's what she does for me. It's this combination of accountability and care and kindness in a really deep way. So that's what I enjoy so much about her because
Mm,
there's no shying away from holding up the mirror like we do as coaches, while also possessing a deep level of personal care for me as a whole person.
mm, yeah. So you mentioned the servant leadership book. What other resources would you recommend? Anything, anything, Jennifer, anything. It doesn't have to be on coaching.
Uh-huh.
You mentioned Marsha Reynolds.
Oh, she's amazing.
Uh,
Love her.
what?
Yeah.
Yeah. We had just a previous guest um, mention Dr. Marsha Reynolds. What would you recommend for resources? It could be podcasts. Dave likes poetry, just so you know. Anything that you recommend that people pick up and pay attention to.
I can give you a list. I'll,
Okay.
I'll keep it to my top one. Uh,
Okay.
the Four Agreements is one of my favorite books, and I read it often. I recommend it to graduate students that I work with. I recommend it to EVPs, CEOs, everything in between. Now, I will say that those who have had some life experience tend to retain it better, and it feels different when we've had some life experience beyond college. So the Four Agreements is certainly a top one. I also recommend to a lot of emerging leaders that they read From Bud to Boss. I think one of the hardest transitions I've gone through as a leader and that I've coached leaders through is making that transition from being the peer to being the leader of their peers, being the direct
Mm.
manager. And it's not something that can be done overnight. It takes time, patience, and very, very diligent understanding of the temperature in the room and how you set it.
Mm.
Uh, so that's a great one, I think. I like the first 90 days for new executives. I think that's a good one to mark down of, how am I making a very deliberate plan to find success in this new role. Um, Podcast wise, I love your podcast. I've been listening to it, and I think it's wonderful, especially because you get to hear from other coaches. So I would certainly recommend yours. I listen to Pivot quite a bit with Scott Galloway and Kara Swisher. That's great from a business standpoint. So I think, especially coaches who are working in business settings, having some context of understanding is great. Scott Galloway can be a little crude, but he's also phenomenal, and his perspectives on young men, I recommend to my graduate student men as well, quite often. Poetry, David White is my favorite poet.
Mm. Wow, just drop that one. I don't think we haven't had anybody drop a poem, Dave.
I have been waiting, so thank you, Jennifer.
The quintessential coach's poem is a David White one, and I think it's called Sometimes. And there's a line in there where he talks about basically acknowledging the questions that won't go away. And I think about our work as coaches and how we can help bring those questions to light for an individual, the questions that won't go away in their head, their heart, and their gut, and how they bring that out and play with it and explore it in a unique
Mm.
way. So that's why I love this.
Mm.
I like
Yeah.
that, and I listen to Pivot as well. And the graduation
Mhm.
I'm going to later today is NYU, where Galloway teaches. So
Mm.
I do some adjunct work, so I get a chance to. The biggest pleasure is watching people in ceremony kind of move on to new places in their life. So there's something special about helping people get to the place they want to be.
Mm.
I 100% agree. And I'm also a professor in addition to my coaching role. And I shook thousands of hands yesterday in my regalia and cap, all of this. So there's energetically, it's wonderful to feed off of that environment of inspiration and next steps and progress. So I hope you have a wonderful day at the graduation.
Hey, Jennifer. I I had a question for you. How do you? Okay, so you worked in companies. You worked sort of on the healthcare side.
Mhm.
How do you affect change? Because I think we spoke a few weeks ago, and things are already changed. Like, how do you do that? Like, how did you get? I mean, is it knowing when or what, or like, so if you're on an academic side, it can feel frustrating on the change. So how do you navigate that as a coach? Um, how did you do that?
That's such a great question. I think certainly there's an intuitive process to it, but it's relying on mentors and leaders in the organization. So if I speak from a coaching culture perspective, um, when I was working for a healthcare system, the CHRO was my boss, and I ran leadership development. He was phenomenal. He had these phrases he would say frequently to me, and this resonated with me. So when I would talk about doing something big and bold and going way too fast for the organization and not meeting the organization where it was, he would say things like, "Bites at the apple, Jennifer. Bites at the
Mm,
apple." And he would talk about meeting people where they are, and those phrases stick with me. And so I think about that even as I affect change in my current organization or in organizations in which I'm working with from a coaching or consulting perspective of how do we gauge what that pace looks like now? How are decisions made now? Who influences those? Who are the influencers in the organization that people listen to? And what makes most sense from a serving each other perspective. So sometimes with change, and we know that people get sort of stuck in their own minutia, and helping them to see how this change benefits them or how this transition, because a change is an event in my mind. Bridges book, Transitions, I think, is another really great one. And I like that phrasing of a change is a single event. A transition is we've made the announcement, now how do we get to this point B that we're searching for? And it's custom conversations, it's repeat phrases, it's utilizing the mentors, the guides, the influential leaders in the organization to help to move in that direction. And being mindful of pace. Don't go too slow, don't go too fast. And that's different for every organization, I think.
Yeah, and I think some of the change makers get frustrated with the pace of change.
Mm-hmm.
Personally,
Yeah.
like that was a big sort of source of frustration. Is like, hey, I want to go faster, but bringing people along would be another like art.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, whatever that is. Mm.
Well, I think the work of the change maker is figuring out, they've been to the other side of the mountain. They know the beautiful views that are there. They've cleared the path to do that. But when they go back to base camp and they have to figure out, how do I get people to trust me to go along on the trail? That's another big element, is being a person that's trustworthy and trusting of others all the time.
Mm. Yeah.
Conscious behavior, setting the temperature.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Dave, what's your reflection on what Jennifer said?
First of all, it's fabulous connecting with Jennifer. I feel like I have like 20 intersections that I want to ask questions about that I know we don't have time for. So to be connected. Uh, I think I really appreciate what you said, and this is my language, my translation of the balance of accountability and support from the person you're coaching, as opposed to like going in as a coach and having a kind of agenda or focus at any particular time. And especially when you're working with different populations, like you're working with students, you're working with leaders, and you're doing different things, you're playing slightly different roles. And I love how you described you have to read it from what's coming from the person on the other side of the conversation. Your
Mm. And I would say mine is you mentioned a few things that I don't know. I always react to one, this idea that coaching is loving, um, because it is the balance between hugging and spanking. Just, I guess I would not really consider that as part of the coaching analogy, but I get it, right? Um, uh, it is. I care enough about you to ask the hard questions, and at the same time, I'm cheering you on the sidelines and saying, "Hey, keep going." Um, and yeah, I think that's the one thing that just sort of sticks in my mind as the role of the coach. I play the dual role of coach and leader. They're going to pay attention to how I show up in the room too. Like I'm not outside of the room. I'm a full participant inside the room.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so when my client says, "Hey, I got a promotion," I can be joyful. And she can or he can feel that. That just happened to me with a client,
Mm-hmm.
and I was so excited. And we were able to kind of sort through all of the emotions that go with it. But boy, that I'm not um, separated from my feelings. Um, I'm a whole person, is what you said. So
Mm-hmm.
really appreciate all your insight, and uh, I am very excited since we just spoke a few weeks ago, and you're a mover and shaker inside wherever you happen to be, Jennifer. That is very, very good. So
Thank you. I
what's
like
a
to say.
What's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
I think the best way is probably through LinkedIn. So do check that often, or people are welcome to reach out to me through Virginia Tech and through that avenue, and that would be fine as well. And so both of those methodologies, through Virginia Tech or through LinkedIn.
Hmm. Great. Thanks. Dave?
So, shout out to our sponsor. Are you feeling stuck or overwhelmed? Character Matters Coaching and Consulting provides leadership coaching and consulting to empower you to overcome obstacles and reach your full potential. Visit charactermatterscoaching.com to learn more about their transformative coaching and how to get connected to Matt for your organization. Jennifer, I so appreciate where you come from as a coach and a teacher. And I definitely would like to continue this conversation. So thank you for sharing with us today.
Same here, and thank you all so much for such a wonderful conversation and setting the tone for the day, for the week. Thank you.
All right. Until next time. Thanks for listening. If you love this podcast, please share it with another coach or leader. Make sure you go to the show notes to get all the resources from today's episode.